Hello again, everyone. Buenas noches. So last week, Dr. Witherington took us through Matthew 8 and 9. And this week, he took us through Matthew 11 and 12. But in between those two portions is Matthew chapter 10, and it's not an insignificant moment in the gospel. So I thought tonight we would spend our time looking at Matthew chapter 10. And if, like me, you've been watching The Chosen, this is actually one of the moments that I think the creators and the actors of that show have captured really well. The stunned incomprehension on the part of the disciples when Jesus sends them out on their own, two by two, away from him to do ministry. And that's what Matthew chapter 10 is about. It has two parts. There's a brief introduction by Matthew or by the narrator. And then there's a long section that's all in the voice of Jesus. If you have a red letter Bible, most of Matthew chapter 10 is in red letters. And this whole long sermon, if you will, is a set of instructions for these ones that he's sending out. So as always, when we're going to look at a passage, we need to set it in its context. So what is happening right before Matthew 10? Well, at the end of Matthew 9, verses 35 through 37, we see Jesus just doing the kingdom stuff, teaching, preaching, healing, and implicit in that healing is also casting out evil spirits. And he's doing it on a fairly large scale. Matthew says he went about all the cities and villages. But Jesus recognizes that no matter how many people he reaches, his ministry, his earthly ministry, is limited by the limitations of time and space and his earthly body. He can't be everywhere at once. And he recognizes that beyond the cities and villages that he can reach, there's a whole world of people lying beyond his reach, a whole realm of people that need the kingdom good news. And so he diagnoses for his disciples what the problem is. He says, there's an abundant harvest. The fields are ripe. They're ready for the combine to just plunge in there. But the workers are few. And he tells the disciples at the end of chapter 9, pray to the Lord of the harvest that he will send out more workers into the field. And then immediately, as we enter into chapter 10, Jesus sends them out as the answer to that very prayer, that rather dangerous prayer, Lord, send more workers into your harvest. And so as we move from this context into chapter 10, I think we probably need to pause and ask ourselves, if we take a look around us at the places where we live and work, where is it that the fields are white for harvest? Where are people ripe for hearing about the gospel? Are we praying over those places? And are we willing to go to those places as the answer to our own prayer? So as we move into Matthew chapter 10, as I said before, there are two parts to this chapter, a brief narrative introduction, and then the rest of the chapter, which is Jesus' instructions. So the introduction is the first four verses, Matthew chapter 10, 1 through 4. And I just want to notice with you two things about Matthew's introduction. Verse 1, then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over the unclean spirits to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness. Can you just sit with that for a minute? Jesus gave them authority over unclean spirits to drive them out and to heal every disease and sickness. That's pretty massive. It's monumental. Jesus' own authority is now being placed in the hands of fallible human agents. Just let that resonate with you for a little bit. Jesus gives them authority to do kingdom stuff, the same kingdom stuff that he himself has been doing. Jesus has chosen to extend his reach through the hands of these 12 men. And that brings me to the second observation that I want to make on this narrative introduction. After Matthew says that Jesus does this, then he names them. He names the 12. And verse 4 says, Simon the Canaanian and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. Included in this group of men who have been gifted the authority of Jesus himself is Judas Iscariot. That is grace-filled. It is hope-filled. Judas had a choice, and Jesus was willing to take a risk on Judas. It's also a warning. Being in the inner circle of 12 was not a guarantee that Judas would go the full distance with Jesus. It's a warning that this is a choice. This loyalty to Jesus is a choice that we continually make on the journey. So I want us to think about, as we pause to consider Matthew's introduction to chapter 10, that this same combination of authority and sending is exactly what we will find at the end of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 28, verses 18 through 20, when Jesus says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given unto me, and then he sends out all the disciples. And we see this illustrated on every page of the book of Acts. We also have authority over unclean spirits to liberate and to heal in Jesus' name. Let me say that again. We have authority, Jesus' own authority, graced up on us to do the kingdom stuff, the preaching and the teaching and the healing and the liberating. I want to invite you to sit with that this week prayerfully and to contemplate, are you truly willing to embrace that part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus? And then the rest of the chapter 10, all in red letters if you've got a red letter Bible, is Jesus' instructions to the disciples before he sends them out. He gives them the authority, but he also gives them some instruction, some preparation. And I just want to notice three things about this preparation that Jesus gives them. And the first is, he encourages them to keep the main thing, the main thing. And in this case, the main thing is the message that the kingdom of heaven has come near. And we see that in verse 7. Both their message and their activities, the healing, the raising, the cleansing, the driving out of demons, everything they do and everything they say is to point toward that central reality, that in the coming of Jesus, the kingdom of heaven has come near. And wherever the authority of Jesus is, whether it's in the embodied presence of Jesus or entrusted into the hands of these disciples, the kingdom of heaven has come near. And that's the center of all that they're doing as he sends them out. Then the second thing I think you'll notice as you read through these various sets of instructions is that Jesus is very clear. Their welcome will be narrow and the opposition will be broad. They will find people who are responsive to their message, but there will be a greater number of people who are not. And this is important because as we go out in mission, as we become the answer to the prayer for more workers for the harvest, we need to understand that this is not going to be a popularity contest. We're probably not going to be filling stadiums or establishing megachurches. That's not what Jesus sent them out for, and it's not what he sends us out for. The response pool of positive responses will most likely be much smaller than the pool of hostile responses or indifferent responses. And Jesus lets them know that ahead of time so that their expectations are realistic. And then the third thing that we see in these sets of instructions is that the reward for faithful, obedient response to this kingdom ministry is a reward that is sure and it is lasting, it is enduring. We may not see it until the end, but it's certain and it's enduring. And that's why Jesus tells them they don't have to be afraid. They don't have to be afraid of the risks that they'll take. They don't have to be afraid of the temporary pain of being rejected or finding themselves in hostile circumstances. Those things are inherent in the mission. But Jesus says, keep your eyes on the horizon because your reward is certain and it will endure. It will be eternal. So as we move through the week, this week, I think a question for each of us to ask is this: in what way is my life, and that's the whole package, my words, my actions, my attitudes, in what way is my life proclaiming the truth that the kingdom of heaven has come near? In what way am I living as a visible signpost of the presence of Jesus, the liberating, delivering, healing presence of Jesus in my world? Some things to think about this week. God bless you as you continue to read and reflect on Matthew's gospel.